My name is Ethan. Welcome to Creature Guide Live Daily News. Put your thoughts into the comments and let's dive into the first article. So, from Sci News, meet Thanatothorestes de Grutorum, new Tyrannosaur from Canada. Okay, I'm definitely not familiar with this species. The new species of Tyrannosaur dinosaur that lived about 79.5 million years ago has been identified from fossils found in Alberta, Canada. Interesting. So this is during the early Campanian stage of the Cretaceous. This is like unheard of for really any species of tyrannosaur to be existing over in Canada at this point in the Cretaceous. Even though you had a couple of species much earlier over in New Mexico, so just west of Texas, around 90 to 92 million years ago. But there was a massive, I'd say 12 to 13 million year gap between their reign, like especially referring to creatures such as Suski tyrannus. So this is quite strange. Even ceratopsians and hadrosaurs at this point, or the different species of lambeosaurians or saurolophans, are extremely rare. Ceratopsians slightly more common, however, or at least known. So let's see what else is going on here, or what he looks like. Wow. Gosh, a huge change in their evolution if this is supposed to represent this oddly named species of Tyrannosaur. It is very much showing like a progression towards like a Displetosaurus sort of a look. I wouldn't say so towards Albertosaurus or possibly even Gorgosaurus, so it might be closer to Gorgosaurus. It seems to have a slightly more robust jaw structure than the other two species. So it makes me wonder if this is a predecessor to the Displetosaurus genus, which still won't evolve for at this point a few million years. Yeah, it's him. And it's by Julius Gotoni of the Royal Terrell Museum. Interesting.
Akita Bear says hi.
Yeah, hello, woolly mammoth. Or Maiasaura. Okay, so we are thrilled to announce the first new species of tyrannosaur to be discovered in Canada in 50 years, said Dr. Francois Therine, curator of dinosaur paleoecology at the Royal Tyrrell Museum. Since over in Alberta. Wow, that's I didn't realize it had been that long, but also there's only been a handful discovered. So, in fact, it was back in the late 1800s when Albertosaurus first popped up and also named after Alberta. The last tyrannosaur described from Canada was Displetosaurus in 1970. Well, actually, I forget that it was that recent with Displetosaurus. At least the original species. There was a second species that came out at around 2018, possibly. So the newly identified species was approximately 8 meters long or 26.2 feet. That's not bad for this time in the Cretaceous, at least before Albertosaurus is going to pop up on the scene, which is around 75 to 76 million years ago. So still for not another maybe 3 or 4 million years. And likely preyed on large plant-eating dinosaurs such as the horned Xenoceratops and the dome-headed Colepiocephaly. um, Interesting. So Xenoceratops, he is one of the ceratopsians that we know of that existed back in the mid to late Cretaceous period, around possibly 82 to 83 million years ago. So he was one of the first species of the Ceratopsidae lineage of dinosaurs, not specifically or not the overall general ceratopsian lineage, which had been around since the mid Jurassic, probably pushing around 164 million years ago. But the ceratopsid seems to have first evolved somewhere between 82 to 83 million years ago. So around 3 to 4 million years after the first members of Hadrosauridae would appear. Let's bring up, however, this likely pachycephalosaur. Colepiosaurophiale. This creature sounds like a dessert to an extent, but um, I mean, he might even preyed on fruit now and then. Okay, well, at least by this reconstruction, he seems to have a bit of a lifted sort of a dome, kind of like with somewhat with what we see in certain genus or genres, such as Stegosaurus, which is not a species of Stegosaurus despite its name. It is a species of smaller Pachycephalosaur. Stegosaurus is somewhere around 6 feet in length or pushing 1.8 meters. Probably only weighed maybe 80 to 90 pounds or a little over 40 kilograms. What's likely occurring here is that it's being pursued by a Dromaeosaurus, but Dromaeosaurus probably either this was at the very beginning of its reign or it hadn't evolved yet. Oh, interesting. I mean, it is a very basal pachycephalosaur sort of a look. Though all of these different species do have their own distinct build or at least even horn complexion around their domes. When looking at pranocephaly or Alaskacephaly, which is from Alaska, I believe pranocephaly is over in Mongolia, but that was around 71 million years ago. And even Alaskacephaly doesn't show up until somewhere between 73 to 74 million years ago over in Alaska. Who else? Homocephaly. Let's see. Then we have Pachycephalosaurus, of course. Well, this is a good reconstruction of Pachycephalosaur. It is interesting. More recent depictions of the Pachycephalosaur lineage, and which, by the way, only evolved close to the time of the different species of hadrosaurs. It's possible that the Pachycephalosaurs first evolved somewhere between 86 to 90 million years ago. They had a relatively short reign. I mean, this lineage of Margocephalians, which is a close branch of ornithischian dinosaurs, related to the horned dinosaurs being the ceratopsians. Technically, they had horns too, but they were much smaller. In certain species like Pachycephalosaurus, we have evidence for the different growth rates, and that younger individuals would have had a very small dome and much longer horns instead. It is interesting how the body decided to get rid of the elongated and robust horns as well, or at least very capable of withstanding a lot of trauma and exchange it for a dome. I mean, it's also a good defense mechanism, but I just find it strange for that to occur. Apparently, those are, I think, toys. It's a good layout. I think this might represent the new species, or it could be an Albertosaurus. It definitely has a longer, more narrow snout, which is now you could say it could be a younger T Rex. It's very possible. T Rex in the early stages of its life had a very similar build to many earlier species of Tyrannosaurs, but even certain smaller species of Tyrannosaurs during its time, like Xenosaurus, Nanotyrannus, slightly earlier on with Nanukosaurus. Even like Albertosaurus, probably maybe even like midway in its growth. But the pachycephalosaurs, in most cases, were carnivores. They were feeding on likely smaller species of dinosaurs, maybe even going after different species of lizards or amphibians, probably not feeding on any species of fish. So, dubbed back to the new species of Tyrannosaur, dubbed Thanatothuristes degrootorum. The ancient creature is the oldest tyrannosaur known from Canada and northern North America. I will say this animal sounds like a hummus. This is the oldest occurrence of a large tyrannosaur in Canada, found in an older window of time than where previous tyrannosaurs have been found. Yeah, I mean, technically in Canada, this would pretty much be the oldest species, despite there already having been needed migrations for tyrannosaurs like Suski Tyrannus to evolve, considering the Tyrannosauroideae lineage did not evolve in North America. It occurred over in Europe and Asia as well, and basically stayed on um, is the Old World region until the early late Cretaceous period. It's still a mystery as to when the tyrannosaurs first migrated into North America. So this is okay. So Darla Zelinsky. a dinosaur researcher at the University of Calgary. With this new species, we now know that tyrannosaurs were present in Alberta prior to 77 million years ago, the age of the next oldest tyrannosaur. It's probably referring to Albertosaurus. So we can tell from the skull how Thanatotheristes degrutorum is related to the other better known tyrannosaurs from Alberta. Okay. Well, oh, whoa. Well, thank goodness we have part of the skull. That's really good to see. Now, unfortunately, it's only the upper part. It's almost like certain species of abelisaurs that we have discovered where it's just the upper part of the skull.
Oh, that's the bottom part too.
Well, okay, the front part of the snout is what I was trying to say. Let's see. What else? Part of the like even back area of the bottom jaw, but I guess that's more towards like the center.
I wonder if he was chewing on jawbreakers.
Probably was.
His teeth are all crushed.
So a partial skull and the upper and lower jaw bones in the new Tyrannosaur were found by farmers and paleontology enthusiasts John and Sandra de Groot in 2010 near the town of Hayes. Okay, let's bring up a ceratopsian. So Alberta ceratops, ALBERTA CERATOPS. Yeah, I mean, this is a good reconstruction of the animal. So, this is a species of centrosaur from Alberta, also dating to around 80 to 81 million years ago, likely evolving shortly after Xenoceratops appeared. So, it's still one of the older species of Ceratopsidae. It does have very long curled horns towards the top of its frill, which is also somewhat found over in Xenoceratops. Xenoceratops tends to have shorter horns occurring towards the top of the skull. Albertoceratops also seems to have a slightly more heavily built or at least reinforced frill compared to other species of centrosaurs and even earlier chasmosaurs that not just have evolved at that point, but are about to evolve in the next 3 million years. So even like around 75 to 76 million years ago, many species of ceratopsians um, did not have the reinforced frills of certain later species, but it could vary. I mean, you do have certain species like even pachyrhinosaurs, pentaceratops. Who else?
This one's from Path.
Oh, actually, that's not a bad reconstruction. I will say that Albertoceratops, I think, tends to be given like very large hind legs compared to certain other species of ceratopsians. Now, it's not a very large species, but it's not necessarily surprising for this point. It's probably pushing somewhere around 18 feet in length or around 5.3 meters, and probably weighed in about 1.5 to 2 tons. But for different species of dinosaurs, such as this new species of Tyrannosaur, this would definitely be one of its main enemies and probably occasionally like a rare food source. I don't mean as in like Alberta ceratops was necessarily rare in Canada during the late Cretaceous, but it's just that it was quite dangerous to take one of these animals down. But I mean, as we can see by the skull, it's very possible that at least with either smaller Alberta ceratops or sick or injured individuals, it's very likely that you might have even have had a pack of these tyrannosaurs take one of these animals down. I'm curious as to the size of the tyrannosaur, but looking out at Alberta ceratops, it does contain that very distinct centrosaur, sort of heightened, narrow dome towards the front of its snout. Very large beak compared to certain other species of centrosaurs, but looking at the overall look, I think of like the frill and even the top of the snout, it's also something to do with the curvature of the eye socket horns. It seems a bit in resemblance to Ionosaurus for some reason, or maybe It's just looking at the overall core, even the tail structure and the shorter legs too. It doesn't seem with creatures like Albertoceratops that it had as an exaggerated hind leg to foreleg ratio as certain other species. Um,
But I found a good one.
like even like Pentaceratops, for instance. Yeah, here it's showing it a bit more. He does have a more bulky sort of a look to him. Yeah, I think even the like dome horn in this instance is a bit shorter in general. See. Yeah, I think that's one reason as to why we don't find any species of ceratopsians even earlier on, or ceratopsids specifically, coexisting with different species of carcharodontosaurs or allosaurs, even megalosaurs, is that those animals were not meant for taking on these armored creatures. And in many cases, they were taking on much larger creatures compared to themselves, being the long necked sauropods, or possibly some larger species of stegosaur. But it wouldn't be by very much, at least when referring to weight, if we're talking about different species of stegosaurs compared to the megalosaurs and allosaurs. It would definitely be even compared to tyrannosaurs, the sauropods, which they're feeding on, but also in some cases just injured or smaller individuals. But with these ceratopsians, just due to how heavily armored they were, or and also just overall heavily built, is probably as to why different species of tyrannosaurs or the later tyrannosaurs in general became so robust as well. But we already start seeing more robust tyrannosaurs appear in the fossil record around 122 million years ago over in China with Tyrannus. The odd thing is that we don't really see any very robust species of, or at least frilled horn species of ceratopsians occurring at that point. So it's a bit odd. Okay. Was there anything else? Jawbone was an absolutely stunning find. We knew it was special because you could clearly see the fossilized teeth. John was always said that one day he would find a dinosaur skull. Finding the jaw was exciting. Hearing that it is a new species and seeing it given our family name was beyond belief. The paleontologists found features of Thanatotherystes degrutorum skull that had not been seen before in other tyrannosaurs. The fossil has several physical features, including ridges along the upper jaw, which clearly distinguishes it as being from a new species. Um, hmm. Or even looking at maybe something to do with either this region of the skull, or it could even be talking about this. Well, that's a big question. I mean, the horn-like structures are somewhat similar to other species of later tyrannosaurs, but it is still distinct. I'm wondering what specifically they're referring to. So the diagnostic evidence showed that Thanatotherystes degrutorum is a close relative of two other well-known tyrannosaur species, Displesiosaurus turosus and Displesiosaurus horneri. Yep, so just like I thought. All three species form a newly named group of dinosaurs called Displetosaurini. Oh, okay. I was wondering where this subfamily of tyrannosaurs came from. I just thought they were sticking the Displetosaurs in it. So they're also referring to Thanatotherystes. All three species from or form a newly named group of dinosaurs called Displetos. I already said that. This group had longer, deeper snouts and more teeth in the upper jaws than tyrannosaurs found in the southern U.S. Yep. Are we comparing it to the much smaller species? That's funny. Which had shorter bulldog-like faces. I wouldn't compare a tyrannosaur with a bulldog. First of all, tyrannosaurs are likely not very inbred. They could likely have a very efficient respiratory system, or at least taking in air. And you wouldn't have to clean out their noses consistently. In a lot of cases, but I also could be mistaking it for a pug. They did have a very powerful bite force, but I'm trying to think of what other animal would be better. I think a crocodile in some instances would maybe be a better comparison. Said Jared Vorse, a PhD student at the University of Calgary. What's with I've noticed this in well, I think they were also comparing like a couple of other predators before with certain modern day animals. Like something I forgot what it was some types of allosaurs or um was it another tyrannosaur species? They compared it with no, it was like a T-Rex and um gosh, there was some smaller species of carnivore. Is it even like some Megaraptor? I don't remember, but they compared it to with like a cheetah. I just found it odd. This discovery is significant because it fills in a gap in our understanding of Tyrannosaur evolution. Thanatothorestes degrutorum provides scientists with insights into the Tyrannosaur family tree and shows that tyrannosaurs from the Cretaceous of Alberta were more diverse than previously known. Well, it's just nice to know the predecessor of at least the Daspletosaurs. Um, I guess maybe we could bring up another species. Well, this time Hadrosaur. Maybe even the Corythosaurus. I think it's been a while. Corythosaurus. Yeah, this is a very good reconstruction of a Corythosaurus. They're even giving it actually quite a wide crest compared to its skull, unlike certain other reconstructions. But I guess you could say Corythosaurus might have the widest crest, at least in a single area, compared to its skull of any other species of hadrosaur. And it's very likely that this animal had small osteoderms running along like the top of its neck to the end of its tail. It doesn't seem to have a very elongated back vertebrae with like what you would see in certain other species, such as Barsboldia over in Mongolia. But that was around 70 million years ago. Corythosaurus had gone extinct at that point. So this was around 75 million years ago over in Alberta, possibly into Montana. So it did coexist with dinosaurs such as Albertosaurus, likely even Pentaceratops, and other species of centrosaurs and chasmosaurs, such as even Pachyrhinosaurs. If that's supposed to be her, not duckling. I'm thinking of duck-billed dinosaur. I have to say this young, what's supposed to possibly be hadrosaur, looks more like a baby theropod of some sort. I would say though, her feet, or at least on her forearms or forelimbs, look a bit more realistic. Though they still seem to they don't have that distinct hoof, like appearance. I think they're a little too separate. This is from a bit further back, but it's still not a bad it's still I mean, it is a good reconstruction of a Corythosaurus. It just might be a bit thin, even when it comes to the forearms. But besides that, I mean, Corythosaurus would have probably lived in herds of, in some cases, several hundred individuals, and likely coexisted with other species of duck-billed dinosaurs, such as Lambeosaurus, Parasaurolophus, likely even certain Montosaur species like Montosaurus regalis in the southern part of Montosaurus regalis's range, considering we find Montosaurus regalis over in Alaska. But Corythosaurus is reaching somewhere around 30 feet or pushing 9 meters and probably weighed in at 3.5 to 4 tons. So it was one of the larger species of hadrosaurs over in Canada at this point in the Cretaceous. Corythosaurus also likely might have made different types of low frequency sounds similar to the other species of hadrosaurs within the region, such as the Saurolophans, the other Lambeosaurans, or at least referring to creatures like Parasaurolophus,
I like
despite
this.
having a shorter crest. Oh yeah. I will say the rest of the landscape looks like a bunch of wood chips or shavings it's walking on. But besides that, I mean, it's very possible with like the males of this species, they might have had a larger neck muscle region. But besides that, I mean, probably seems to be in par with um, other species of hadrosaurs at this time. I'd say Lambeosaurus and Corythosaurus in many instances are quite similarly built, except for their skull structure, especially with Lambeosaurus having a two-sided crest look. Oh yeah, this looks really good. This would definitely represent like a thicker area of conifers, or in some cases looks a bit like a cedar. Seems to be mushrooms or fungi that are placed on one of the trees. Um, Sort of a look during the late Cretaceous. So you also, I mean, would have had these animals coexisting with different species of chasmosaurs like Styracosaurus in the region, and they possibly might have even competed for food in certain instances. Now, you do have it with different ecosystems today where different species of animals are feeding on different varieties of vegetation. Like you can have it where moose are feeding on the aquatic plants, reindeer are feeding over on the moss and lichen, and maybe if you're looking at North America specifically, white-tailed deer feeding on different types of shrubs. It might have been similar with the different species of hadrosaurs and ceratopsians in the region. So you might have had it where the hadrosaurs were probably focusing on certain species of like tougher ferns, and ceratopsians because hadrosaurs have a very efficient chewing capacity or efficiency. And the ceratopsians might have been focusing also on ferns of certain kinds, but also maybe different types of shrubs and shorter trees. You also had ornithomimids in the region, or ostrich like dinosaurs like the ornithomimus, but they were likely feeding on different species of insects and seeds. So maybe feeding on leftovers that the ceratopsians and hadrosaurs would leave behind. Well, this is really good to see, and it answers a massive gap or fills in a massive gap within at least Daspletosaurus's evolution. So let's head to another part of the world and see what else is going on in the Mesozoic. So, from Science News, dinosaurs were warm blooded. Study of fossil eggshells suggests using a novel technique called clumped isotope paleothermometry. An international team of paleontologists analyzed eggshell fossils representing three major dinosaur groups and found that these creatures were characterized by warm body temperatures.
But wait a minute. When did Balker first started saying this?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, Dr. Robert T. Bacher, who brought back the theory that dinosaurs were warm-blooded, intelligent, likely even feathered or animals, um, was bringing this up with his mentor John Ostrom back in the 1960s and heavily pushed it into the 70s, the 80s. And this was also a theory that occurred back in the, I believe, 1840s with Reverend Edward Hitchcock over in New England when studying different types of dinosaur footprints, at least of different types of theropod dinosaurs, but possibly maybe even certain hadrosaurs or ceratopsians in the area, which possibly from New Jersey, which is part of where he studied. Okay, so we have a
Wait,
couple of.
why was the theory being stopped?
Yeah, it seemed to be that certain paleontologists over in England at the time, so referring to the 1830s, 1840s, were rejecting his theory and wanted to put out there that dinosaurs were these scaly, cold blooded, slow, not very intelligent, and possibly like not even being able to really care for their young sorts of reptiles, much more closely related to lizards than birds, and even a bit more so from like even crocodiles or alligators or the crocodilomorph lineage in general. I don't believe Archosauridae had been described or even discovered at that point. I mean, technically the dinosaurs are archosaurs, but it's just that they're earlier ancestors, what I'm referring to back in the
Wait,
Triassic.
if you're gonna bring up them, explain what they are.
So archosaurs, it would refer to certain species like Euparkeria or see, I'm trying to think of who else, like even Ephegia, but Ephegia wouldn't become different species of dinosaurs. It's referring to species of reptiles that existed around 245 to 250 million years ago that were maybe 3 to 4 feet in length. They're pushing like maybe 1 to 1.3 meters.
Wait. Archosaurs were reptiles?
They were. It's very possible that even some of the earliest species were warm blooded, but you had different branches take off into or branch off into the different marine reptiles, such as the long-necked plesiosaurs, the pliosaurs, the mosasaurs, and as well another branch that would branch off into the different species of pterosaurs like Pteranodon, Quetzalcoatlus, Pterodactylus, and then the pseudosuchians or the different species of crocodilomorphs, including today's crocodilians, and as well the dinosaurs. Now, technically, you could say there was another branch that would create these proto dinosaurs, but the proto dinosaurs, like Ephegia, would not continue until, or at least beyond the late Triassic period. So, by about 203 million years ago, the proto dinosaurs had gone extinct. And a nesting cassowary like dinosaur named Bai Bai Long, sinensis in the act of incubating eggs.
Why does that thing look like it's wearing a fur coat?
Yeah, it does. It's a bit of an odd complexion. I mean, it would have helped camouflage it in certain instances. Now, with the background of the conifer forest, probably a little less so, unless it's kind of barren underneath. But likely, it was covered in dense array of ferns and flowers,
But it looked. I mean, is it, what's it look like? It's wearing
like some sort
a
of
mink.
yeah. Yeah, there's another type of animal. I think, like, maybe even certain cats in, Southeast Asia.
A wolf.
Oh, I mean, it could be. Oh, yeah, him. Yeah, definitely.
You thought I was talking about him?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was looking at. So dinosaurs sit at an evolutionary point between birds, which are warm-blooded, and reptiles, which are cold-blooded, said Dr. Whoa, wait.
Doctor White.
um, I wouldn't if you're talking about, like, whether or not they were ectothermic or not, it is very heavily, not just agreed upon, but a lot of just physiological evidence when it comes to their anatomy, pinpointing that these animals are likely warm-blooded. Also, efficiently moving in cold climates, without having, in some cases, a lot of access to animal protein is necessary for a warm-blooded animal or for an animal to be warm-blooded. So said Dr. Robin Dawson, a researcher in the Department of Geology and Geophysics at Yale University. I think I might have misstated that wrong, considering it's really consuming the animal protein or ferns, at least for the herbivores, that would have helped with regulate their body temperature, not as much just standing out in the sun like a lower intelligent alligator, or I guess in their case, different species of crocodilomorphs. Not that they were completely brain dead, but it was less so. Our results suggest that all major groups of dinosaurs had warmer body temperatures in their environment. Okay. You have certain species like the sauropods living in late Jurassic Colorado, which was immensely hot. You probably had it where well, the question is, how did these animals keep themselves from overheating? Because that was a major concern during the late Jurassic. If there was something really almost any dinosaur did not need to worry about, it was um, heating itself or keeping warm. Considering there are many instances where its average temperatures of 100 degrees Fahrenheit or over 40 degrees Celsius.
Wait a minute. What about the ones that were in the snow?
That would be earlier in time or later. The late Jurassic, like especially around the 143 to 158 million year mark, was a very hot time during the Mesozoic era. There were certain warmer times, or just as warm, during the Triassic, but I think in some cases it wasn't to the same extent. It is, however, when you see some of the largest species of dinosaurs occur, which is interesting. There's also the instance during the early late Cretaceous, which was also a very warm time. There doesn't seem to be Um, at least looking in certain areas of South America and Africa. I'm not sure about Antarctica and the Arctic at that point, or different areas of Alaska, Russia, whether or not it was cold, but I'm referring to between like 93 to 100 million years ago. So you have creatures like Argentinosaurus and Patagotitan appear. Clumped isotope paleothermometry is based on the fact that the ordering of oxygen and carbon atoms in a fossil eggshell are determined by temperature. Once you know the ordering of those atoms, you can calculate the mother dinosaur's internal body temperature. For example, eggshells of a troodon, a small meat-eating theropod, tested at 38 degrees, 27 degrees, and 28 degrees Celsius, or 100.4, 80.6, and 82.4 degrees Fahrenheit. I wonder how. Yeah, we're really wondering how they're able to come up with that sort of an estimate. But it is mentioning the I'm just not too familiar with paleothermometry, at least in this way. We have found, like, I think over 20 different eggs, so maybe almost as probably like 2 dozen or 24 eggs from Troodon. It is interesting. It's one of the only species of meat-eating dinosaurs that we have discovered the eggs of. I don't believe any had an embryo intact, but I'll have to double check. Eggshells from the large duck-billed dinosaur Maiasaura yielded a temperature of 44 degrees Celsius or 111.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Whoa, wow. I mean, you could say they are coming from a larger animal, but still, I'm kind of wondering about the egg material. Maybe also due to what they're eating, which has a very huge impact on every single modern day species of bird today. And at least the robustness of their eggshells. So, well, not just their eggshells, but even the yolk, the egg white itself. Um, let's see. You know what? Let's bring up Troodon. Troodon. Now, with Maiasaura, we have found hundreds of eggs from this species of hadrosaur. They also seem to be very common. It was discovered over in Montana during the late 1970s. This has a very non-Troodon like look, if like even looking at the sickle claws, so that distinct claw on the foot, and the facial structure. It is far too broad compared to any type of troodontid. This is better. Much more narrow snout and very small sickle claws compared to its body size. It's also being pictured as being over in the snow, which is very likely for a wide variety of different species of troodontids and also the different populations that would have inhabited different parts of Russia. Even Mongolia would have experienced snow at certain points, possibly even northern China, Canada, and Alaska.
Is that a toy?
Yeah, I think so. I thought it wasn't at first. It's got like a I don't know, Rudolph sort of a look to it.
Oh, this is good.
Oh yeah, that might be of a baby troodontid. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Or it's just of a smaller species, but he's he has a bit more of like a broad snout. So there's also something else about like his arms. He's probably a youngster. It's very possible with the different species of troodontids, the dromaeosaurs in general, that they would have taken care of their young, much like different species of tyrannosaurs and possibly even allosaurs.
Okay, this one's funny.
I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like an oil gland or a scent gland, or he's tearing as he's
I just thought it looked
washing
like
the
he was
mammal
a
right off.
zombie.
Um, Yeah, well, it's trying to emphasize that troodontids have very large eye sockets, like the largest eye sockets compared to their body size of any lineage of dromaeosaur. However, this one has very large sickle claws, but the longer snout is closer. It also has a bit of like a velociraptor, focusing on the skull, not the rest of the animal. Sort of a complexion to it. Hmm. Many species of troodontid also were reaching somewhere between 6 to 7 feet in length, or were not much more than 2.3 meters. And in a lot of cases, also not weighing much more than 30 to 40 pounds, or a little over 15 kilograms. This is not a bad reconstruction. I think it's an older model from maybe like the mid 2010s. I don't remember what it's from. It might be that Walking with Dinosaurs, the movie model. Okay, this what's interesting is that it has a bit of like a velociraptor sort of a skull structure. The arms are oddly positioned. I guess it's a bit of like a 1960s sort of a look for many species of raptors, and they would just have their arms um, almost trudging along the ground, but small sickle claws. It's very troodontid like. This looks like a coelophysis or a Camposaurus, some creature from the Triassic period, like 213 million years ago. The interesting thing is that well, they're also covered in feathers, and I think it's supposed to represent maybe a mother or um, a father with its young. But it's also making it look like it's a bit of a cooler sort of an atmosphere, which at least referring to it as in temperature. It's very possible considering we do have evidence of much cooler climates occurring during the later Triassic period. So 210 million years ago, you could have come into contact with different blizzards over in or snowy areas in like Alaska, Canada.
John Doe's in the chat. Says hello.
Oh, welcome back, Theropod. Oh yeah, also even in Antarctica at that point during the Triassic period. Probably not so much over in South America and Africa, which might not sound surprising, but you could still have in different parts of the Mesozoic or even the Cenozoic era, different areas of those two continents that actually have much cooler climates. Kind of like today in certain higher altitude regions of Chile, Argentina, and it heavily snows in the region despite being quite dry.
Oh, you want to catch him up and tell him where we are?
So we're going over different fossilized eggs over in, I think, well, okay. Basically testing the paleothermometry of troodon eggs and a species of hadrosaur called Maiasaura and its eggs and seeing the difference in temperature. So it is interesting, and considering Maiasaura probably lived in a very similar climate to certain species of troodon, it is very possible where it was in Montana, however, that it didn't experience the more brutal winters over in Alberta and as well, very likely different areas of Alaska. So, but I just find it incredibly interesting that it's at least a 30 degree, no, not 30 degree, 11-degree difference with one of the eggs. At least the eggshells of the Troodon. That's interesting. Actually, that wasn't hitting me originally. One of them is only 80.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The other is 100.4 degrees, or 27 degrees Celsius and 38 degrees Celsius.
That other one's 111.
Why would that be? We're not even looking at like a smaller species of theropod dinosaur and a much larger species. And then the Maiasaura, which is a creature that weighs somewhere around 3 tons. It's cooking. Like, I'd be concerned about those eggs. Oh, the thing is that you do need it with different species of at least baby birds today or chicks that they actually need to be in a very hot region, like pushing in some cases between over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. So,
Oh, you mean for them to
stay warm considering their feathers. The feathers that they have at first are not really meant for keeping them warm. They're almost just a bit of insulation, but really not temperature wise.
oh,
But
you're not talking about the eggs, you're talking about the babies themselves. Okay.
yeah, the newborn chicks. It's more of just to keep them a bit more durable. So both the Troodon and Maiasaura eggs were from Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, fossilized dinosaur eggs from the Ooh species, a species classification limited to dinosaur eggs. Okay. Megaleuthis from Romania. tested at 36 degrees Celsius or 96.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Huh. Yeah, I have no idea what that is. So, petrographic microscope images of dinosaur eggshell. A to C are well preserved Troodon eggshells from Alberta, Canada. Arrows and horizontal lines point to the approximate boundary between the mammillary and prismatic layers. Presence of two calcitic layers is diagnostic of non-avian theropods. So it's stating that these specific types of characteristics of the eggs are only found on non-bird species of theropods. So animals like the dromaeosaurs, allosaurs, tyrannosaurs.
So John Doe asks, "What's your opinion on dinosaurs being warm-blooded or cold-blooded?"
Yeah, I do think that the warm bloodedness for the animals makes a lot of sense. It also, I was actually kind of surprised, I think, earlier on that they were theorized as being cold blooded, considering, like, even with the animals living in much warmer environments. Like, I really thought, considering how active they're consistently portrayed to be. I don't mean in recent depictions, but even back into the 1950s, 1910s, the 1800s. Though, when you look at depictions, I'd say from the 1820s and 1830s at first, it is not surprising that they would be reconstructed or seen in a cold blooded way. They're being depicted as these just ugly, slow, unintelligent species of reptiles. But when then you're looking at the different footprints that are being analyzed by paleontologists such as Edward Hitchcock, then all of a sudden it made sense that these animals are likely very active, and not likely relying on the sun for a major part of their energy.
Wouldn't the ones that lived in the snow need to be warm-blooded?
Well, that's the other thing. You do have certain reptiles today, even amphibians, that can live in certain cooler climates, but it's very rare. They also need a massive change in temperature to become active. Now, I do wonder why certain, like, very few specific species of reptiles or amphibians can withstand colder climates compared to most others. But yeah, when looking at the dinosaurs and their ectothermia, their warm bloodedness, likely warm bloodedness, um, I think it becomes a bit more definitely matching, or seems to make more logical sense. Like, as you head into like different 1880s, 1890s reconstructions, because we have pretty good reconstructions or depictions of dinosaurs by that time. I think many tend to think of, like, possibly the 1950s or 1960s when we start seeing a huge difference. And you had um, different pictures occurring in the 1890s, at least, that were very similar to certain 1950s or 1960s reconstructions.
I didn't even know warm-bloodedness was a word. Like,
Oh, do you think it was?
I I didn't know it was a word. I just looked it up. I'm like, "Is that a real word?"
Um, Also, like, when you look at different species of birds today and you're looking at, like, their overall scale complexion along their ankles or their metatarsal bones, some cases, depending on the species, even their upper shin bones and their toes, it's very likely. Well, also, when you're looking at especially a theropod or a meat-eating dinosaur foot itself, it looks very similar. At least when it, probably not the scales, because, well, actually, you could if you're looking at different skin complexions of different species of dinosaurs that we have discovered. They can be very similar to certain species of birds today, as well as the pigmofibers or preservations of birds that we have discovered. And but the overall just look of the feet can be very similar. Even when looking at certain species of herbivores like the hadrosaurs. Sauropods, though, very different, but um, I would also assume just to move that large body mass around. Now, actually, you could say, because of earlier theories that maybe it would be better for an animal that size to be cold blooded because it doesn't have to consume as much food. It's also putting a lot less, I guess, stress or damage on different plants in the environment. But you also have it where those plants are specifically adapted to sustain those large herbivores.
Wouldn't that be then saying that a whale would be cold-blooded?
Whales, however, feed on meat, though, like they're going after krill. They're also inhabiting, in many cases, much cooler environments. Now, it does seem with certain species of sauropods, they might have come into contact with like a cooler sort of a um, certain cooler temperatures, but it might have been for a very limited amount of time. And still, there might not have really have been any blizzards where they occurred. Certainly possible. But yeah, I very much agree with the warm-blooded theory. Let's see. So the scientists conducted the same analysis on cold-blooded invertebrate shells in the same location as the dinosaur eggshells. This helped the team determine the temperature of the local environment and whether dinosaur body temperatures were higher or lower. Yeah, you can look at the sediments and figure out whether or not you're looking at a swamp like ecosystem. It was a dry, arid desert in some instances, a conifer forest.
Pro animators in the chat.
Well, welcome back, Megalosaurus. So the
Okay, hold on. Let me switch where I'm reading this from. John Doe said, "Is it possible to switch from warm-blooded to cold-blooded, or when they get to a larger size?"
I don't know, but
Is that ectothermic?
no, ectothermic's just warm blooded. Um,
What is it?
like
What is it when they're like half or something?
yeah, I need to see if there are any types of animals or if like if that's possible to occur. So I don't know. Um, though I see what you're saying. Like when they were younger, and it would give them like a kickstart and growth. Well, the thing is that even when you look at a lot of larger warm-blooded animals, so really focusing on, well, even certain herbivores, certain carnivores, it can still take them quite an extended period, like over 20 years, to finally hit that adult mature stage. And with the cold-blooded animals, in a lot of instances, it's actually quicker, despite having a much slower metabolism, um, relying on the sun to a major extent. So that's interesting. It's almost like when you really look at it, um, well, okay, then you have certain warm-blooded species of animals, like birds, for instance, that might only take um, a year or two to fully mature, not including certain breeds that people have created, which can mature within a few months. Um, so yeah, it varies, but I need to also double check and see if there are any cold-blooded animals that take a long time to mature as well. It seems to be, I think, a bit mixed.
Well, there is theories of that they evolved and changed as they evolved, but not during their life.
Like, are you referring to like earlier ancestors of, yeah, the dinosaurs being possibly cold-blooded, but there's also possible chance they were warm-blooded as well. And
What
they
about the
just
archosauromorphs?
well, I mean, you might have even have had it with different species of pseudosuchians, which were a branch of archosaurs that were cold-blooded in many instances, because we don't really find any species of pseudosuchians or crocodilomorphs in very cold environments. However, that's not necessarily true if you're taking in today's animals, for instance, like the American alligator, for instance, which can withstand pretty cold temperatures. Simply, certain populations over in North Carolina keep their snout above the water as it freezes. So they go into a state of hibernation. I'm trying to think of others. It might be that the alligator, even like the Chinese alligator over in dwarf alligator in China, they're just rarities. Hmm. Marine reptiles like the ichthyosaurs. We have found evidence of these animals not necessarily being cold-blooded, but having certain characteristics that a warm-blooded animal, like per se a whale, would have, like an extended layer of fat. But it's still possible that they were cold-blooded. So it can be a bit confusing in a lot of ways when looking at these mixed characteristics. Though it does seem to be with the warm-blooded creatures that they um, tend to be a lot smarter, and also not necessarily that they're not capable of per se taking care of their young, but probably the parenting being quite limited. There was another thing. Maybe also the warm-blooded creatures created a larger variety of species, but then again, insects would like a word. So, yeah, that's a question I need to dig into. Or, um, yeah, I don't know at the moment. The Troodon samples, so focusing on these eggs, were as much as 10 degrees Celsius or 18 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than their environment. The Myosaur samples were 15 degrees Celsius warmer, or 27 degrees Fahrenheit, and the Megalolithus samples were 3 to 6 degrees Celsius or 5.4 to 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. What we found indicates that the ability to metabolically raise their temperatures above the environment was an early evolved trait for dinosaurs. Um, maybe that's where the Megalolithus came from. Let's look that up to make sure that
What?
this is a species of dinosaur, the Megalolithus. I've not heard of it.
Where is it?
It's right there.
Okay, see it.
It's like at the beginning of Megalosaurus, and then can't think of any dinosaurs at the moment with Lulithus. All I can think of is, well, probably Thus in some
It's
cases,
actually a film called that. No, no, it's no. No, it's not. Something else.
or Ithus. Ithus.
Oh, is it oogogenous of fossil dinosaur eggs?
Well, it said that earlier, but I thought maybe it was something else. Maybe that's it. That's odd.
Sauropod dinosaurs laid these large, nearly spherical eggs. They feature very thick egg shells so trying to eat them would be difficult. That measured 1.5 meters across.
One point. Yeah, I think that might be a bit long of an egg. I mean, it might be referring to the hatchling, not necessarily the egg. That's
Says the egg.
no, that's 1.5 meters. That would be pushing around a little over 5 feet. No, the largest dinosaurs that we have discovered are about the size of a large football. That's about it, and I'm referring to an American football. Um, but I think it was mentioning that it's referring to sauropod dinosaurs. That might make sense considering the Troodon samples are still warmer, and the Myosaura egg is much more.
2 feet long and 11 pounds. I don't know how they would do a weight on it. It's fossilized.
Well, yeah, that's a big question too. Well, maybe there's something they can narrow it down to because it's also like coming up with an estimate on different species of prehistoric animals, especially the dinosaurs.
But
Let's
though
see.
we have, I mean, you've had me check things constantly and said that AI gets it wrong.
Yeah, there have been several mistakes. I mean, obviously, like even the different depictions in some cases, but yeah, I think that it might make sense that the sauropod eggs would be cooler, is because they're being laid in a much warmer environment compared to what's going on with most species, probably all species of hadrosaurs, and definitely the troodontids, which in many cases were um, depending on the part of Cretaceous, living in snowy environments, it would only be like that for a part of the year. But you need a much warmer climate to contain these specific forest ecosystems to supply these much larger species of titanosaurs, brachiosaurs, or diplodocus feeding on these different species of trees. So, in turn, you probably wouldn't need as warm of um, an egg or possibly like even a body temperature because there comes to a point where it's a danger for even the eggs themselves. So what we found, oh, I think I already said that. Okay. Let's head to some part of the Cenozoic era. Probably staying in the cold. From CBC.ca, 40 hours of nonstop driving. Jeez. Brings Alberta bison to their new home in Alaska. I'm guessing there were going to be different checkups with these guys, kind of like what occurred with the Sumatran rhino that headed from the Cincinnati Zoo a few years back to Indonesia, but that's different. It's by plane as well.
John Doe said, "My guess is they just expand the chicken eggs and guess the weight of the dinosaur egg." Wouldn't that be more of an ostrich, though, that you would do that with?
You could do it with a chicken egg, especially for smaller species of dinosaurs. The problem is that chickens historically, if you're going back three to 4,000 years, were living really only in India and China, and then they were gradually introduced to different parts of the world, and then different breeds occurred that were meant for cooler environments, but some for even hotter areas.
And how large were the eggs?
They might have been smaller than certain breeds of today, but um,
Weren't chickens half the size?
Yeah, many cases, but also when referring to the red jungle fowl, also named by Carl Linnaeus, that's I think it really only reaches somewhere around 3 to 4 pounds, even with the rooster. It might be slightly larger. Um, there might be another species because there's 4 or 5 different species of wild jungle fowl over in India and China. But I think only 1 or 2 species became the chicken, most coming from the red jungle fowl. Um,
Pro Animator put a picture of a bison up, I think.
okay, I'll keep going. Alberta raised herd of wood bison relocate north in effort to restore the species. I think we brought up, we went to a bit of discussion with the chicken eggs, and now I just thinking of a breakfast sandwich. So let's see. Yeah, they're a bit thin, but depending on the time of year, it's I guess not too surprising. They could be younger. I think these are females. So wood bison calves are seen at the Elk Island National Park. Oh yeah, this area. East of Edmonton. So this is over in Alberta. In this undated photo. They are part of 44 wood bison sent to Alaska this week as part of conservation efforts to help restore their population in North America. Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how long that would be. Oh, well, here's 2 very recent freshly laid chicken eggs. So also one's from specific breed, and the other is from another. Trying to closer.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you can see that one of the breeds, for some reason, lays much shorter eggs, but it also could be this specific egg came out much shorter than usual. But that can happen. There have been instances where a like 7 or 8 pound chicken will lay an egg like that's about the size of a quail egg, which is thinking at least in this case, maybe a sixth of the size, or maybe a fifth. That's very small. Huh. Back to the larger mammals. Dozens of Alberta raised bison calves sent to Alaska as part of a relocation agreement with the state made it safely to their new home. Interesting. I was actually assuming they were going to only send different adults. I don't recall many. Now, maybe what it is that these bison calves are, already maybe 6 to 7 months of age. But it wasn't without months of logistical work and a 40-hour trip on treacherous northern roads. Jonathan Demore, resource conservation manager for Elk Island National Park, said the 44 wood bison arrived in Fairbanks, Alaska on Tuesday night. Oh, yeah. So the calves, which are all under a year old, departed Monday morning from the park east of Edmonton on a specialized semi trailer called a cattle liner. So the liner was kitted out with wood chip bedding, water, and hay, their food choice, and the animals were given a tranquilizer to help calm their nerves. I think she just want to stay attached. Yeah, pretty much. So a long drive. Demore said the animals were inspected by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency before they were loaded onto the liner, which remained sealed for the nonstop drive to the Alaska interior. Um, the live bison were inspected by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I'm guessing, like, just in case they had not bronchitis. I forget. It's that disease they're concerned about with the bison over in Yellowstone, different other populations.
John Doe said, "Fun fact: the buffalo in Yellowstone and other national parks are actually descendants of the buffaloes that were sent to the Bronx Zoo in New York City in the repopulation plan."
Maybe a handful, but there were also certain bison individuals that came from Wyoming, so over in the Yellowstone region, to Texas, and they were then sent back. So it was a mixture, I think, of certain saved populations, but Bronx is one of them.
Pro Animator said, "Am I the only one who remembers the albino bison that was born on 20 in 2024, June 14th? June 4th,
Um, is this recently? Maybe. Yeah. It seems so.
2024 of June 4th."
Oh. Um, maybe.
Hold on.
Oh, that one. Yeah, okay, now I remember this. Yeah, and it's came from also a blondish bison individual. I guess like a yeah, lighter brown coat. It almost has a very like ice age sort of a look to it. But yeah. Yeah, distinct white bison. Okay, yeah, this was over I think on some nature reserve or conservation area maybe. Um adjacent to some Indian reservation. I think it was somewhere in the Midwest, or was it in Texas? I'm not sure. So we hold our. Oh, they unloaded every animal successfully. Demore said in an interview Wednesday, "We hold our breath a little bit because it's a long drive." He said the trip took a little longer than the usual 36 hours because of snow and slushy conditions on the road near Whitehorse. I think Whitehorse is in Alaska, right? Or is it
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
no, Dead Horse. I don't know if White
Oh,
Horse is.
Whitehorse then might be Yukon.
John Doe said, "I remember it followed an Indian prophecy allegedly."
Yeah, I think I remember that too. The Bison entourage included 3 Elk Island staff members in another vehicle, constantly monitoring the animals' welfare. They have some contingency supplies along with them just in case anything happens during the drive. I would just think you're I mean, it's 40 hours, kind of having to keep an eye on them. Yeah. Let's see, who else? The only pit stop was in Whitehorse, where the truck driver handed the animals off to a second driver to finish the trek north. Park staff spent months selecting the large hoofed animals and getting them ready. They also had to undergo a 60-day quarantine separated from other bison. I guess so they kind of lost their bond gradually weakened. Trying to think of what else. Maybe something to do with certain viruses or diseases, but maybe not. I would assume everybody else is vaccinated or maybe like dewormed. This was the fourth wood bison transfer from Elk Island to Alaska, which previously received herds from the park in 2008, 2022, and 2024. DeMoore said the park has a memorandum of understanding with the state that includes another transfer in 2 years. We're likely to renew that MOU. We haven't entered negotiation around that yet. I think they're here in Alaska. I think they're all older cabs. Huh. Oh no, they're at Elk Island. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. I'm like, I don't recall that type of vegetation over in Alaska. I mean, maybe it's possible in like the southern regions. But okay, yeah, this looks more of like the flatter regions of the lower elevations of Alberta. And this is a little further away from like different fossil basins or fossil formations like Dinosaur Park Formation or the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, where different species of late Cretaceous tyrannosaurs, hadrosaurs, or duck-billed dinosaurs, ceratopsians, and dromaeosaurs are found. There are more than 170 wood bison in Alaska, which are all from Elk Island or descendants of ones that were. The relocation program is part of a federal government plan to ensure survival of the species, which was once on the brink of extinction. They aren't exactly common these days. One of the main ways the fully fenced park manages its bison population is by moving them to other natural habitats, including indigenous communities in North America. It's not very specific, but I'm guessing it means other like open woodland and the smaller grassland regions. Wood bison used to extend from Alaska, Yukon, down to southern areas of Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. In fact, let's bring up a wood bison because it's not showing up any adults. They look very distinct from American prairie bison, European bison. It's all the bisons we have today. I mean, bison. Technically, you could probably say bisons. It's like, look, referring to different types of fish. So you say fishes. Yes, it's him. I guess from this angle, it might look a little more like a prairie bison,
It looks AI.
but they have, I think it looks authentic. Hmm. I'm looking. They could be wood bison. They're
It
just
says Alaskan Wildlife Conservation Center.
Yeah, they're a bit more poofy or furry at this point. So it's a bit more challenging to see that distinguished sort of elongated shoulder vertebrae. And even like their head structure is very different from American prairie bison. But wood bison and bison still belong to the same species. They're just different subspecies. So you can have it where different species or the same species can have very different looking subspecies and also be quite differently or quite distinctly genetically related or distantly related. I guess this could be one. He looks a little shocked and annoyed. He just looks.
He looks old.
Maybe.
He has a gray beard.
Oh, yeah. I guess slightly. His fur looks to be in pretty good condition. But besides that, yeah, they're much taller than American prairie bison. I think wood bison can reach
He has an
somewhere
afro.
around. Yeah, he definitely does. It's very poof. Well, that's why I'm wondering, is this just a very large American prairie bison and that's a wood bison in the background? Because wood bison, they almost have like their own distinct hairstyle compared to the American prairie bison. American prairie bisons have like afros, and then they decided to add in like some, I'm not sure, just their own black hair, but shorter, not as poofy, sort of a look.
What is this?
And even their horns are a bit more like longhorn shaped.
Looks like his mouth is open.
Oh no, that's his bell. So it's kind of like with moose
But where's his
and
mouth?
distinct area of fur. It's right there. There's his lip. Yeah, it's right there. It's not. It does look like he's has a very wide mouth in an instance. I'm trying to think of another animal that can be confused with. Maybe it's I swear it's not the moose, it's something else. Alaska isn't the farthest Elk Island bison have traveled. The park used to have a memorandum of understanding with the Sakha Republic in Russia. I didn't know we were sending bison to Russia. Um, find that strange, but also like wood bison even being there. I don't recall Russia being a native part of their range or historically a part. Oh, wood bison were sent to a national park there in 2006, 2011, 2013, and 2020. For whoa, what? Hmm, that's a shocker. I really thought they were all being sent to Alaska. For those transfers, Demore said as many as 30 bison were loaded onto a military transport plane. Steppe bison population there was extirpated, but the wood bison are the closest living relative. Whoa, wait a second. Steppe bison. Like, are we referring to Ice Age bison? Like, is this one of those instances where they, um, was it over in northern parts of Norway or Sweden where they sent muskox to kind of try to reclaim this ecological niche that they had not occupied for over 6,000 years? And the problem is, many of them died, and there's not a lot of genetic variety in that population. It's occurred with other animals as well. I'm trying to think of who specifically. Um, I think it's also like that odd instance of sending bison back to the UK and I think specifically England for the first time, also like since the Mesolithic era, or 6 to 7,000 years ago. And it's like, I mean, yeah, they could probably um establish some niche in the region, but really after that, you just had towards the different oryx in the region or the wild cattle. So I just find that a bit odd. There are no plans to send bison to the Siberian territory after relations between Canada and Russia worsened with the war in Ukraine. But I just think it's odd because steppe bison have been around for like 11,000 years. Elk Island has played a key role in the conservation of bison since the early 1900s. Demore said plains bison are usually relocated to areas south of the park, while wood bison, which were introduced there in 1965, are better suited for boreal forests to the north. Yeah, because where like Edmonton is situated in Alberta, it's like towards the northern area, at least in Alberta, of like the different prairie region historically. Prairie bison, like with what you see over in Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, like Caprock Canyon State Park in Texas, even northern Mexico, don't really extend much further north than southern Alberta or Saskatchewan and Manitoba. It's just not preferred habitat anywhere north of that. Though I think there might have been certain instances where American prairie bison have been not necessarily as like part of a conservation area, but just purchased as like cattle. And I think like certain part of Kodiak Island, supposedly, like with the bears, and they had just a larger area of property. And I think originally, the brown bears in the region were stealing people's. I don't remember if they were sheep or maybe smaller cows, but they introduced or they brought the bison over, and the bears just didn't touch them. They're like, nope, that's not a mountain goat. I prefer something I can just knock out pretty simply, and not the opposite way around. So, and yeah, of course, fish. I'll just go fish. Okay, well, yeah, this is interesting. It's good to see that we're sending more over there, but I have heard of certain deaths occurring with the wood bison in certain areas of Alaska. Now, that's, you could say, technically a bit natural considering there's wolves in the area, and of course, bears occasionally going after the calves. But really, just even due to not even like car accidents, but um, just really hard, snowy or icy conditions where they can barely move in certain scenarios, or there's like sharp ice. So, yeah, this is definitely interesting. Okay, I guess let's head to another part of the Cenozoic. From news.mongabay.com, safeguarding passageways is the next step for India's growing tiger populations. Well, maybe something else has occurred? Whoa, this is under a highway pass. Wow. I actually didn't realize that India had this kind of a thing. Wow. I wonder how well maintained it is, though. I mean, it must be okay considering he has the confidence to walk underneath. Seems like a healthy tiger. It's either like maybe a 3-year-old or it's a female, possibly. Doesn't seem to be a large individual, but so the coat seems okay. It also is probably the wet season. The forest around here is green. Usually, like um, the thought when you think of like different Indian forests is that it's dry and the leaves are wilting. And yeah, during the dry season, that's very much the case. But this is still surprising even for the wet season. It's like you're looking at some deciduous forest in certain parts of North America, Europe, Asia, Northern Asia. This is South Asia. Okay, as Bengal tiger numbers rebound in India and increasingly disperse into human dominated areas, conservationists are urging the government to prioritize protecting ecological corridors that connect vital habitats and tiger populations. But they also warn that corridors shouldn't become sticking plasters for compromised core habitats. Reports contributor Nirmal Ghosh for Manga Bay.
Normal.
Like the cat,
That's
Garfield.
that's what I was.
Yeah, I guess so. India is home to roughly 75% of the world's wild tigers. I thought it had maybe increased a bit more in other regions, but maybe not. The national population has more than doubled from an estimated 1,827 in 1972 to an estimated 3,682 in the 2022 census. Huh. Thought we were like approaching 4,000. I guess we're much lower. Well, that's 2022. This is a bit behind, unless it's going to mention something later on.
Uh,
Okay.
Akita Bear said, when you on the questions at the end, can you please recap the Ma- Maruzara dinosaurs?
I think that
And
was
also love your chicken eggs.
yeah, they taste very good. But yeah, I think we're referring to the eggshell. I think supposedly it was a sauropod. They were sauropod eggs that they were referring to. But yeah, I can likely bring them up later on, like towards the end. So experts estimate that 35% of India's wild tigers now live outside protected areas. I don't think that's a new thing, but it also seems that a lot of people are almost living within the national park. Young tigers leave their mothers to establish large home ranges, which for males can cover up to 200 square kilometers or 77 square miles. I think in some instances larger, though it can have to do with like the availability of habitat, how plentiful is the prey source. In doing so, tigers frequently navigate a highly fragmented matrix of roads, railways, and urban sprawl. Without safe pathways, isolated tiger populations risk inbreeding and local extinction. In response to rapid infrastructure development, India has constructed more wildlife underpasses and overpasses than any other Asian country. According to Bilal Habib, a scientist at the Wildlife Institute of India, a government run research center. Yeah, I think it's because when it comes to South or Southeast Asia in general, actually, you could probably say all of Asia, not including the pandas, um, is that India has probably had the longest historical amount of um like wildlife studies, wildlife conservation, just the number of zoologists, like even back in the late 1800s, who else? Like different ecologists, botanists, also like different just animal. Well, I'm going to say different scientists like coming in from the Netherlands, the United States, Germany, Scandinavia, even Italy, and doing like intense studies on like the feeding behavior of different species like elephants, tigers. It really started in India, and then gradually it would occur into different countries.
Oh,
Like
I thought that would have started in Africa.
it likely did. I actually haven't dived very much into that, but really, at least with scientists coming in from Germany, the United States, really doesn't seem to have taken off until like maybe the 1930s, 1940s. But yeah, technically, I believe there were already national parks or game reserves being constructed much earlier on into the 1800s. Like, I think in some cases, shortly after Yellowstone National Park, the first national park to be created over in the United States, which was, I think, in 1876 or was the 1880s? I don't remember. Okay, so government run research center, Wildlife Institute of India. This includes the world's 10 largest wildlife mitigation structures built since 2017, such as a 12-kilometer or 7.5-mile underpass beneath a newly opened expressway connecting New Delhi to the city of Dehradun.
What year did you say?
I guessed 1876 at first, and then maybe
1872.
oh, hmm, maybe I'm mixing up with Yosemite or um I was going to say Badlands National Park over in South Dakota. I don't think it was until like Theodore Roosevelt, which was 19 first decade of the 1900s.
1890 Yosemite.
Oh, okay, it's much later. Anybody else like Grand Teton National Park?
Yosemite. Well, wait a minute.
Big Ben? Was
Abraham Lincoln signed the Protecting Yosemite Valley in 1864. Congress established the surrounding land as a national park in 1890.
huh. Wow. Okay, I didn't know that. I think I also forget or you forget sometimes about the like gold rush back then.
And the state protected Yosemite Valley and Grove were officially merged back into the federal national parks in 1906.
Huh. Well, yeah, it is during Roosevelt. I'm trying to think of like anywhere else, like even Rocky Mountain National Park. That's over in Colorado. Interesting. Let's see. Oh, so I don't think anywhere in the world, any developing country has spent as much money as we have on mitigation exclusively for wildlife conservation. As an American, I would like a word. Okay. And even like Canada, Western Europe, you can jump into. And then our mates in Australia, they can hop into. Kangaroo joke. Anyway, at the same time, linear infrastructure and projects like mining continue to divert forests. Pakritai Srivastava, a former principal chief uh, conservator of forests in the southern state of Kerala, and Purna Bindra, a researcher and author, have documented how the National Board for Wildlife, which reviews projects in critical wildlife habitats, has essentially become a rubber stamp body. It approved 97% of project proposals brought before it over a 12-year period. Bindra was a former member of the board standing committee. Ulas Corinthus.
You got a whole bunch of laughing emojis running up after you did that.
Yeah. Who else? Probably even sticking like South Africa and New Zealand. Um, Probably even like Yeah, maybe a Botswana. Let's see. Where was I? Oh, so Ulas Karanth, the tiger expert and emeritus director of the Bengaluru-based Center for Wildlife Studies, told Mangabe that tigers will only use corridors if there is a motivation to cross. I think a consistent drive, because that's pretty fleeting with that word. But yeah, it wants a larger territory, needs a territory. It's looking for mates. It needs access to more food in general, even water. So yeah, there's a variety of things. It's trying to escape maybe poaching, um, which requires healthy habitats on both sides. So usually also in that instance, maybe even better habitat. So to me, the context is first to secure the core habitat. India could, in fact, accommodate up to 10,000 to 20,000 tigers if habitats are adequately protected. Okay. With the population, even if it is a bit overestimated, I don't think that might be possible. I mean, India's around twice the size of Alaska, but even then, you have it where there's only what 750,000 people in all of Alaska, and that's how you're able to fit in so many carnivores. That's only including tigers, not even the elephants, the rhinos, the deer, different species of antelope, like the nilgais.
But wait a minute. Hold on.
You couldn't fit um
They don't uh, tigers don't go around in prides, do they?
no, but it's like over in Alaska, you have around like 40,000 brown bears, around 35 to 40,000 American black bears.
No, that isn't what I
Um,
was getting at. The lions could have more just because they all hang out together.
yeah, that's oh yeah, it's not even including the lions in this instance because you have like what 6 to 700. I haven't checked on like a recent number, but over in like the Gir Forest region in India,
John Doe said, off topic, but I have to say Barbarossas are gnarly.
Babirusa, the pigs, yeah. Um, Yeah, it's just a concern when their tusks can have it where they'll grow into their skull. But yeah, I mean, they definitely love munching on intaking the different minerals from different clay deposits to likely help break down the toxic chemical compounds in certain species of plants that they eat. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, one of these four tusked wild pigs. I think it's a closer relative of the red forest hog than per se the wild boar or different breeds of domestic pig or the desert or savanna warthog, which are two distinct species. So yeah, it is omnivorous.
Oh,
Very
this
small
guy's gonna have
ears.
a problem.
Oh, well, I mean, if they decide to continue the curl, then you might be fine. But yeah, those that
Oh,
can be an
this is
issue.
worse. Never mind.
Oh, oh no. I think he's also in a captive setting too. So
Why don't they
somebody,
cut him?
yeah, they'll do it to the elephants, but not not these guys. Uh, that's kind of sad. But hopefully, maybe it's.
This one just doesn't want you to see his face.
Oh yeah, it's a young piglet. He probably hangs out with Tigger. So while there's a common belief that animals restrict themselves to wildlife corridors, that's not how it works in reality, according to wildlife biologist Ravi Chelam. I think he's referring to like just the wild areas themselves.
Pro
Uh,
Animator says, I feel bad for those things.
yeah, the Babirussas. They can also have a bighorn sheep too. Elegantly and clearly demarcating narrow wildlife habitats on a map and calling them corridors is not the solution. Animals don't limit their movements to corridors. They use a matrix of habitats available in the landscape. I think like any creature just wants to, move around and not stick to. Well, it can vary actually depending on the species. There are certain species of animals it's like a precise, narrow type of direction, but they still might move from time to time. Um, do we continue?
There's one left.
Okay, so from Times of India.indiatimes.com. In 2024, a beaver returned to Strawberry Creek after 19 years and began cutting down aspen trees beside a man made dam. Well, that's not a beaver. I think that's a nutria. For,
Isn't that funny?
yeah, I'm like, they look very distinct. Distinct. And like, beavers also have that long, flat tail they use for storing fat, and the nutria has that very distinct rodent. I wouldn't necessarily call it thin, but technically it is long tail, and they're from South America. For nearly 2 decades, there was no sign of beavers along Strawberry Creek in Great Basin National Park. Then in 2024, park staff discovered evidence that one had returned. Several quaking aspen trees had been freshly cut down beside a beaver dam analog, a human built structure designed to imitate the ecological effects of a natural beaver dam. The discovery was particularly encouraging because the nearest known active beaver dams were more than 5 miles downstream. The animal apparently traveled a considerable distance before reaching the restored section of the creek. Even more remarkably, the beaver began using a landscape that humans had deliberately prepared to perform some of the functions beaver naturally provide.
John Doe said the enemy of the mountain goat is gravity.
Uh, oh yeah, yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I'd say in a lot of instances, those guys seem a bit overconfident. That's a nutria, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at his teeth. I'm like, whoa.
What was he eating? A popsicle?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think it's due to maybe the high amount of iron in their diet that gives them that specific coloration, or it's another mineral. But yeah, he's definitely healthy.
I don't know how someone would confuse though a beaver with it.
I mean, you could say at first glance, they might, but then, especially when you look at the tail, and there's a very distinct difference. So the National Park Service described the discovery as the first sign of the species in Strawberry Creek in 19 years. Although the animal apparently moved on without building a lodge, its arrival offered an unexpected indication that restoration was creating conditions suitable for a natural ecosystem engineer. Its brief presence also suggests that carefully designed restoration can help reconnect wildlife with habitats where natural populations have long been absent. After the fire, Strawberry Creek no longer looked like the cold mountain stream its native trout needed. I don't know where Strawberry Creek is. Somewhere in the US. The story began with the 2016 Strawberry Fire.
That's in Great Britain. Oh, basin.
Yeah. Great Basin. It sounds like somewhere in the western United States, like Utah, or I think it may be Utah, which burned 2,790 acres of Great Basin National Park.
It's in Nevada.
Oh, well, that would make sense too. Yeah, the basin over there.
I understand. You know almost every national forest and park throughout the world.
It's a really dull area, but yeah, I mean, no, that still should easily come to mind. Among the areas affected were the riparian zone surrounding Strawberry Creek, an important mountain stream that provides habitat for Bonneville cutthroat trout and supports wider ecological processes. So the cutthroat trout are also the fish that grizzly bears over in Wyoming, Montana, Idaho will feed on, and historically they did over in Nevada and Utah. The fire removed vegetation along the creek, increased water temperatures, and contributed to erosion and sedimentation. Yeah, it's unfortunate when this occurs. For the trout, the consequences were severe. For the fire, Strawberry Creek had been the park's most productive Bonneville cutthroat trout stream. Afterwards, fish disappeared from severely burned sections, while average population density fell sharply. The loss of streamside vegetation also meant less shade and cover. While erosion altered the creek's physical structure, the restoration team therefore needed to rebuild habitat rather than simply replace individual plants. It's kind of though. I think you would have to do that in this situation anyway. But I guess like the beavers. What's with the nutrias? Scientists rebuilt the creek by copying the work beavers naturally do. This is not a beaver. He does nothing. Well, okay, there are certain things he does like a beaver, but at least the whole ecological process. This guy will come over to certain rivers or lakes and just, well, especially North America where they're invasive too, um, wreak havoc on the native mussel populations, which help purify the water. And yeah, he is
That's why he's making sure you can't see his face. He doesn't
yeah,
want you to be able to track him.
yeah, he's a muscle predator. In reality, he's probably just grooming in this instance. Beginning in 2021, the National Park Service and its partners introduced low tech process based restoration, or LTPBR, to Strawberry Creek. Instead of reshaping the entire stream with heavy machinery, workers installed structures made from locally available wood and sediment. Among them were beaver dam analogs and post assist log structures. These structures were deliberately designed to imitate processes normally performed by beavers. They slow flowing water, capture sediment, raise the stream channel, and encourage water to spread into the surrounding floodplain. They can also create deeper pools where fish can shelter and survive the winter. Between 2021 and 2024, restoration crews built and maintained 74 LTPBR structures along Strawberry Creek. The approach was intended not to freeze the stream into a particular shape, but to give natural processes the opportunity to continue the restoration. Oh, yeah, I mean, this is good. There's actually seems to be relatively, I guess, quick restoration compared
How long
to
is this article?
other instances. It doesn't seem short. So the restoration began changing the water long before the beavers' return. The restoration produced measurable changes in Strawberry Creek. Monitoring between 2021 and 2024 showed that the number of captured Bonneville cutthroat trout more than doubled to 136. Hmm, That does not sound like a lot of fish. With fish found at 8 of 9 survey sites, researchers estimated a density of 511 fish per mile, compared with much lower numbers immediately after the fire. Okay, I guess I'm glad to see that there is an increase, but um, is this like a very small creek? 'Cause that's not a lot of fish. Or are there just not many carnivores that naturally hunt them in this area? Structures also increase slower moving pool habitat, with the proportion of these areas rising by 10% between 2022 and 2024. Well, I mean, it's good to see. One structure initially created a pool about 3 feet deep, or 1.1 meter, no, 1 meter, almost, and eventually trapped nearly 500 cubic feet of sediment. Um, Not exactly sure how large an area it's supposed to be, but sounds like a bit. By slowing and spreading water, the restoration work reduced erosion and created conditions where riparian vegetation could establish itself. The changes demonstrated why process based restoration can be useful. Instead of constructing a finished landscape, it creates conditions that allow the stream and its surrounding ecosystem to keep changing naturally. There we go. Finally, there's a beaver. Gosh, the nutrias. And yeah, he's busy at work over in the winter. Yeah, I think many tend to associate beavers with just staying in the lake or in their own immense beaver dam home. And in reality, they're still out there in the forests cutting down trees. It just takes a bit longer. Oh yeah, there's a
What always amazes me when you say how many beavers actually live in the US or North America.
yeah, somewhere between 12 to 15 million. And
Wait a
I
minute.
think this is a
How
kitten
many
or a pup.
raccoons live here?
How many what?
Raccoons?
Oh geez. Probably close to the same amount. Maybe slightly more. Think Toronto is estimated to have like 200,000, which is a lot for an urban area. And especially it's like, where those guys are living. It's definitely not all in the trees.
So it's up to 20 million.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, it's a lot. They have become invasive in different areas, especially of the western United States. Um, I think there were certain introduction programs.
Wait, raccoons?
Yeah. Different parts of like Idaho, Nevada, Utah, they're not supposed to be in those states. Even Montana, really like the Rocky Mountain region, they're not native to that area. Maybe like over in the northern Rockies of Alberta and British Columbia, but even then, it might be out of their historical range. Eastern United States, certain parts of the Midwest and Eastern Canada was historically raccoon country or their native habitat. Device. I'll just go down a little bit. Then, after 19 years, fresh teeth marks appeared on the creekside aspens. Clearest sign that the restored creek was becoming more suitable for beavers came in 2024. Park staff discovered several quaking aspen trees had been felled by a beaver, providing the first evidence of the species in Strawberry Creek in 19 years. The nearest known active beaver dams were more than 5 miles downstream, suggesting that this was a wandering animal that had explored the restored habitat. There was an almost poetic detail to the discovery. To fell a tree or not to fell a tree. The aspen trees the beaver cut down fell directly onto one of the newly constructed beaver dam analogs. The animal did not establish a lodge there and apparently moved on. Wow, actually, that's kind of surprising, but he is far away from all the others. So the discovery did not represent a permanent recolonization. Nevertheless, the tree cutting was an important ecological signal. A species that had been absent for nearly 2 decades had once again interacted with the creek.
Said there's tens of thousands of them in Japan now.
Oh, right. Europe and Japan have also um have had raccoon havoc since like the 1930s. Though I think that Japan started in 1960s or 1970s.
Says Tokyo has around 1,300. Wait, no, they trapped 1,300 of them in a
Yeah.
year.
Yeah, I was going to say I think they have more. Let's see. So the beaver's arrival, kind of unfortunate though, but offered a glimpse of what natural restoration could become. I think it's just being a bit repetitive here. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to give everybody a minute to put anything into the comments. However, I guess I'll talk about that egg thing real quick. So it was the what Mesolith, whatever that was, Megalolithus. So I think it referred to this unidentified series of long necked sauropod dinosaur eggs, and apparently they are much cooler in temperature compared to the different hadrosaurs, or at least the Maiasaura, and the dromaeosaurs, or the troodontids in the region. Probably because the hadrosaurs that we don't know where specifically they were found and what time period, but most sauropods inhabited much warmer climates compared to especially Maiasaura and Troodon. So it's very likely that they simply just didn't need the increased amount of heat to contain their eggs, um, or at least to keep their eggs incubated. It's also a bit of a question as to whether or not they would have covered their eggs with vegetation or um, possibly even with sand like sea turtles. Though I think that might have been a bit more complicated for a sauropod because a sea turtle can just gently, use its flipper, though it can um, be a bit of a hard, slap, but just gently uses its flipper to put sand onto the eggs, whereas a sauropod has to be really careful, and it's not really laying its eggs in a massive sandy area. Maybe oviraptors might occasionally, but they stay with their eggs. Sauropods probably would have just built the nest and laid their eggs, and that would be pretty much it. That would contain. It would need quite a bit of energy from the sauropods to even gather a certain amount of vegetation to cover their eggs, especially in a organized way.
Pro Animator said, day 7 of watching the daily live stream. It's been worth it.
Well, thanks, Megalosaurus. Yeah, I think with the sauropods, at least with the Saltosaurus, we have found the eggs of, and as well as different species of larger Titanosaurs. Saltosaurus is a member of the Somphos lineage, or a member of Lithostrodidae, not a member of at least Titanosauridae. Let's see who else. Also found eggs from Lufengosaurus. Psittacosaurus, the smaller ceratopsian from early Cretaceous China. So that was around 112 million years ago. But their eggs are going to be tiny because ceratopsian was not much larger than like maybe 50 to 60 pounds or a little over 25 kilograms. Maybe it was slightly larger. See anything else? Oh, okay. I guess this now will give everybody a minute to put anything else into the comments.
Big question here. Pro animators asking. I know there's you, Ethan, but who's the other guy?
It is my silent producer. Um, Trying to think of what else from, especially, I guess, yeah, that was also really good to hear with the Tyrannosaurs towards the beginning of the stream, considering it has been a mystery for at least, I guess you could say, at least the 1970s at this point, like for the ancestor to the Daspletosaurs, which it likely is that new species that popped up. Albertosaurus and Gorgosaurus, however, that is still a big mystery. Maybe Suski Tyrannus at least 90 million years ago, but 80 million, that's still a question.
Oh, Akita Bear on Kick said earlier, they're so cute, but trouble. I was referencing the baby raccoons.
Mm. Oh, yeah. They definitely are. And it is interesting. I mean, when you watch them like go after like different types of crayfish, but obviously when copying their mother and sometimes even other raccoons, um, they're very quick to catch on. I guess it's almost like when you're watching beavers and they try to start taking down a tree. Okay. Well, thanks for joining. And from prehistoric to present, my name is Ethan. This is Creature Guide Live Daily News. We are streaming on both Rumble, YouTube, and Kick. And remember that nothing is better than all animals all the time.